What I'm saying to people across the country is that we need some common sense leadership in Ottawa, like we've had right here in Ontario. You know, lower taxes to create jobs. We need to have smaller, more efficient, more democratic government, and we need real respect for the institutions of justice. We have to put some justice back into criminal justice. So if you like what Mike Harris has done for Ontario, and if you like what Ralph Klein's done for Alberta, you're going to love me when I get to Ottawa. And let's let the campaign begin. Thank you very much.
For the next few minutes, learn about the man who can unite the right and bring victory to the Canadian Alliance. Meet Tom Long.
Well, I grew up in Sarnia, the petrochemical valley. I grew up in the south end of the city, closest to the plants. My mom and dad still live in the same house that I grew up in. Dad worked for Dow Chemical all of his career. He was a process foreman there. You know, I was the first one in my family to have the chance to go to university. I worked my way through school, got a law degree, and I've practiced law and worked in business ever since. I married Leslie in 1993, and you know, we've got a beautiful little girl, Memphis, who's 3. She's full of energy, just tears up the house. We just had another little girl just in the last short while. I've also got 2 other kids, Melissa, who's 17, she's a beautiful young woman, and Michael, who's 12, you know, he's a goalie, so for all those hockey parents out there, you know that he marches to a different drummer. It's really my kids that got me into this race. You know, I want something more inspiring for their futures. I want them to have opportunities right here at home, and that's why I decided to get into the race for leader of this party. Well, look, I'm not a professional politician. I'm a businessman. I've never run for public office before. A lot of people say that that's a strike against me. People keep telling me everywhere I go in Canada, it's one of my strongest assets in this race. They want someone who's going to really go down there to Ottawa and shake things up. And I'm going to do just that. You know something? It's time we injected some real democracy into our political system. We need to give every citizen a money-back guarantee on the MPs that they elect. You know, if the MP gets down to Ottawa, forgets where they came from, starts representing Ottawa to you rather than you to Ottawa, I want you to be able to call them home. I also want to make sure your MPs can do their job, speak for you. So we're going to let our MPs have more free votes. And while we're at it, we're going to really reform the Senate. We're going to make it elected. We're going to make sure it's effective for you. We're also going to make sure that it better represents the population reality of the country today. I think it's time for real change, and I think it's time to take a little common sense and small business approach down to Ottawa and really shake things up. Well, you know, Ottawa doesn't understand this, but every person I've talked to out there who has a son or a daughter understands full well what the problem is with the country. The experts tell us that we're losing our standard of living, that in about 10 years without change, our standard of living is going to be roughly 50% that of the Americans. Parents understand it because we're finding more and more of our kids are looking to go to school and pursue careers outside of this country. And I just think that we've got to get this thing stopped before we're a country where our children only come home at Christmas time. So we've got to get our taxes down, our personal taxes and our business taxes. We've got to be prepared to pole vault over the Americans and the rest of our competitors in the world economy and make this country an enterprise zone. Make it a magnet for young talent, for entrepreneurs, for investment, so that we can create the kinds of leading-edge jobs that our kids are going to want right here at home. That's the kind of leadership we've been lacking in Ottawa. Jean Chrétien is a tired old man with tired old ideas. I say it's time for a new generation of leadership that understands why our young people are looking outside the country, can find real solutions to keep them here for all the right reasons. I had the honor of serving as president of the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party in the late 1980s after the voters invited us to take a breather from office. You know, our party was in trouble. We'd fallen from government to 16 seats out of 125 in the legislature. We were $6.5 million in debt, and our party was dispirited. We had a lot of alienated activists who felt like nobody in the elite of the party was listening to them. I ran on a program of what we called renewal. We opened the party up. We brought in one member, one vote before it was fashionable to do it. We changed our constitution to make sure that every party member had a direct voice in our policy development. And we brought in a new board of directors for our fundraising and financing arm. We democratized that because I really felt strongly that if we couldn't show the people of Ontario that we could run our own finances as a party, they weren't going to let us run the provinces. The result of all of that was Mike Harris, the Common Sense Revolution, and a big victory in 1995 and again in 1999. So in the late 80s, we called it renewal, while a lot of you were calling it reform. But the fact is we were on parallel tracks moving to the same destination. I think that's what's so great about the Canadian Alliance. We're all going to come together where we ought to be. Well, you know, we've got a bunch of folks in Ottawa, Liberals, who just don't know the value of a taxpayer's dollar and get themselves involved in all of these big spending Liberal programs. Let me give you a great example of what I'm talking about. I was out in British Columbia in front of the Ferndale Minimum Security Prison out there. They call it Club Fed. And just over the fence behind me was a golf course. They've got tennis courts, fly fishing, and pony farms at these prisons. They treat some of our hardened, convicted criminals better than our women and men who serve in uniform. You know, I went to CFB Trenton in my home province to meet with some of the enlisted personnel, and I saw the really shocking conditions that they had to live in. So why is it that our convicted criminals get to fly fish while the women and men in the armed forces don't have the proper tools to do the job we're sending them there to do? So we're going to close the luxury prisons, and we're going to make sure that our armed forces has the money and the resources that they need. That's going to be a big change. You know, you can't have first-class health care with a third-rate economy. That's why I talk so much about the need for tax cuts to create growth. Healthcare costs are going to continue to climb. We're getting older. Medical technology is advancing. What's wrong with Ottawa right now is that they're not prepared to be practical about how we can make improvements in our healthcare system. I believe that there are three things that are important in healthcare. Number one, folks have to get the healthcare they need when they need it, and we're failing them on the last half of that sentence because Jean Chrétien hasn't been there to pull his weight. Secondly, people have to be able to get the health care they need regardless of their financial means. That's part of what it means to be a Canadian. But thirdly, and it kind of relates to my second point, we have to provide the health care that people need as cost effectively as possible. If we let health care costs get out of control, they could put our economy into a ditch, and then we're going to lose everything that matters to us. So how would I be different from what we've got in Ottawa? Well, pretty clearly. Number one, I'm going to stop wrapping myself like Chrétien does in the Canada Health Act while cutting billions of dollars out of health care spending. We're going to restore those cuts. We want the provinces to know that we're going to be a dependable ally and a dependable partner for them in building better health care. But secondly, we're not going to do like Alan Rock does and push the panic button anytime someone comes up with a creative new idea to improve health care. Instead, we're going to respect our democratically elected provincial governments. Nobody goes into politics, I don't care what party, to try to undermine health care. So we're going to work with them on the three principles I've talked about and bring about some practical solutions so that patients, when they walk in the door of their hospitals, know that they're going to get the care that they need when they need it. Well, you know, Jean Chrétien, he was first elected to the House of Commons when I was 5 years old. And you know something, it shows. He's been there a long time. So he doesn't think that there's any waste in government spending at all. So I'm going to help him out a little bit by identifying some things that we'd change. First of all, I'd end all corporate welfare. If a business or an industry doesn't have what it takes to turn a profit, why are we as taxpayers being asked to prop up failure? And you know something else while we're at it? I just don't believe in special interest group funding. You know, it's kind of crazy what happens up there. The government gives these groups money so that they can come back and lobby the government for more money. I'd rather just give everybody a big tax cut, and that way if folks want to support a special interest group or a cause, they can write a check themselves. That's the way it actually ought to work. Well, you know, the Chrétien gun law, Bill C-68, is about a lot of things. It's about hiring 1,000 bureaucrats. It's about spending about $370 million. But what it isn't is gun control. I lived in a high-crime part of Toronto for 8 years, and we sure did have problems with crime, but I'll tell you, the problem wasn't illegal guns so much as it was hardened professional criminals. And they're the people least likely to sit down and fill out Alan Rock's forms. So we say scrap that law, Keep the safe storage and usage parts of the law, which every responsible gun owner supports, but take the money they're wasting and put it into more police officers on the street so we can deal with the professional criminals who are the problem in the first place. I believe in equality. I think each citizen should be equal with every other citizen. It should mean exactly what the word says. I believe in equal rights for everyone and special rights and special status for no one. And you know something? You want to see a policy that's been failed over the last 130 years. Look at our policy with respect to the Aboriginal peoples. Somewhere along the line, we concluded that socialism was no good for us, but we've got a government in Ottawa, Jean Chrétien leads it, that wants to impose socialism on the Aboriginals. You know, we've got this Nisga'a Treaty that Jean Chrétien and the elites, federal, provincial, and amongst the First Nations, imposed on a whole bunch of folks who had no voice in it. And I want to make it clear that that treaty is going to be a template for exactly nothing. We believe in Aboriginal self-government, but as a delegated form of municipal government under the same federal and provincial laws all of us are under. We should all be equal under and before the law. You know, 3 out of 4 Quebecers in a recent survey said they don't want another referendum. They don't want to go back to the old 30-year treadmill of constitutional debates. They're not saying that the Constitution is unimportant, because it is important, but it can't crowd out all of the priorities of average families. The folks I've talked to have said, look, our taxes are too high. Real family incomes are either stagnant or falling. They've said, look, we have problems in our criminal justice system. We want somebody to do something about them. We have practical problems in health care. Show some leadership. That's what they're saying. And what I'm saying is that there is an alternative to the professional wrestling match that Lucien Bouchard and his belligerent form of separatism and Jean Chrétien with his antique federalism, what that offers. I know why these two politicians want to polarize Quebec on this issue. But I've said to Canadians across the country, don't ever confuse the leadership of Quebec with the people of Quebec, because they are like us in saying that they want real change in Ottawa. They want the lower taxes. They want real law and order. They want a government that's going to do something practical about health care. They want smaller, more democratic, more respectful government. The folks I meet with from coast to coast are steamed at Ottawa because Ottawa keeps telling them we don't have a problem with crime. And the citizens of this country know that that's just not true. Look at the Young Offenders Act. There's a piece of legislation that just points our most troubled young people in the wrong direction, tells them that there's no criminal consequences for criminal action. We're going to change all of that. We're going to make sure that violent and repeat offenders over the age of 14 are tried as adults, that everybody over the age of 16 is going to be tried as an adult. We're also going to bring in truth in sentencing. If you're sentenced to 25 years in prison, why is it that the federal law lets you out after you've only served 2/3 of your sentence? Did you know that Karla Homolka is going to be free in less than 390 days? I think that's an outrage. People in this country want real change. And while we're at it, why don't we have a prime minister and a government that actually stand behind the women and men who serve in uniform rather than criticizing them all the time? We're going to bring big change to law and order when we get to Ottawa. On June 24th, you have an important decision. It'll be a difficult job because the consequences are so powerful. Now, I know from talking to many of you that you feel torn, but this decision can't be made solely on the basis of personal or regional loyalties. What's at stake for Canada is so important that the Alliance simply can't afford to finish second. I'm not running because I'm the champion of one great single issue, no matter how important. I'm not the one who shouldered the burden of bringing us this far. I'm running because I can make the Alliance work. I can bring us together. Unite mainstream reformers and conservatives, unite West and East, and mount a winning campaign that can beat the Chrétien Liberals. Now, we do have our challenges. We're 30 points behind, so you need to think about who can win the country so that we can put our ideas into action. To win, we need to hold on to what we have, but we need a big breakthrough in Ontario. So on June 24th, vote for victory. Join our campaign. I'd be deeply appreciative of your support. Thank you.
Tom Long to lead the Canadian Alliance.